give me a signal when 30-second leaders run, and we'll get rolling here. Hope everybody enjoyed their lunch. Yeah, right. A little tough on the eyes. I feel sorry for these guys.
Yeah.
Oh, they're movie stars.
Right. They should be wearing sunglasses. We can copy of the book. That's for the introduction. There's a little sign sticking
Bookmarks.
out. Look at it. Okay. Okay, our next speakers are Terry and Leslie Patton. They're authors of the book Biocircuits, Amazing New Tools for Energy Health. My introduction to the Pattons came several years back. I think it was about 4 years ago or so. Leslie called me up and said she was doing a book on Eeman, and she wanted to know of any more information that Borderland had, since she was familiar with the publication we had put out for about 20 years or so, actually Riley Crabb before me. And I connected her with Peter Lindemann, who had been doing some active biocircuit research. And it's actually snowballed into quite a bigger project than I think anybody thought. They've done a really excellent job, in my opinion, of both putting the information together, distilling it into a good form, and also they've developed both silk and copper biocircuits for use. So we're very happy to have Terry and Leslie Patton here. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Speaking at a Borderland event is really home base for us, because the work we do with biocircuits wouldn't really be possible without Borderland Sciences. Tom mentioned a few things that he did as a key catalyst in our project, but I think it's important to say that Eeman's work would have been perhaps totally forgotten if it had not been for Riley Crabb's keeping it alive in this country for 20 years. And biocircuitry is an extremely, in our view, an extremely important, almost central tool in the life energy sciences. So Borderland Sciences deserves to be credited, and we feel a great deal of gratitude to Borderland, to both Riley and Tom, because the role they played is key in our even being able to be here and speak today. The reason that we feel that biocircuitry is so key in the life energy sciences is that it is a fundamental or basic technology. It is not a particular high-tech developed tool that will have its market cycle and disappear. It's a fundamental tool. It's probably in the life energy sciences second only to the laying on of hands as a basic tool for contacting and balancing life energy. And it works on a principle as fundamental as acupuncture. We were first introduced to biocircuits by Da Frijan, who was at that time our spiritual teacher. And in our book, we quote him about them in a way that it's a nice, comprehensive quote about biocircuitry that seems like a good place to begin with our talk. He said, "We should all basically feel and perceive that we, as well as all others with whom we are associated, are radiant. This is not a matter of imagination, it is true. If you become doubtful and want to prove that you are energy, use biocircuits for a few minutes. Remarkably, they will communicate to you that whatever else you are a field of energy. Energy is running through your hands, your fingers, your back, your head. You will discover that you can change your sensations simply by causing those currents to run differently. Anyone who does this even once will gain a sense of himself that he perhaps did not have before. By using biocircuits, you create a circuit that is different from the circuits being created by your tensions and stress. The body thus receives energies in areas that have been closed off, and you gain a new sense of balance or rejuvenation. But you also begin to notice something about yourself as energy. That is very important to notice. Eventually, you will notice it without biocircuits. You will begin to enjoy such bodily sensitivity to the flows of energy that you will enter into the right relationship to these energies in every moment. You will enjoy the capacity to transcend your negative circuitry and live in a state of fullness of energy without tension. Thus, you can effectively learn the lesson from biocircuits, but then you must take on that disposition psychophysically at all times. I should mention that he continues to use biocircuits almost every day. Enlightened or not, they have a role for us all. The question that must be arising for at least some of you at this point is, what is a biocircuit? Why don't we begin by answering the most basic question here. Leslie's pulling out a copper biocircuit. They can be made of other materials, but the longest history of use is with this type of device. And you use it by lying on your back on these screens. In your right hand you hold a handle, and then the screen connected to it is placed at your tailbone or sacrum. And then the left hand holds the other handle, which connects the top of the spine. Now this is in the most basic, what we call the Eeman general relaxation circuit. And this is the best known circuit, and it's the one that Riley described in his publication that kept biocircuitry alive during that whole period of time.
You do that while you're lying down, not standing up.
On your back, and you cross your legs, because there's another circuit that is not accomplished by the copper biocircuit in this configuration, which is a closure between the feet. And that simple connection creates a very profound flow of energy, not unlike an acupuncture treatment, which most people subjectively experience as rushes of energy, which they can feel, usually in waves that build up and ease, and a progressive sense of deep relaxation. And they come out of the session, which lasts about 30 minutes, deeply energized, rejuvenated, and balanced. That's the basic idea of what a biocircuit is. It all began with the work of L.E. Eeman. Why don't we get into that when we get to that?
Oh, I wanted to talk a little bit about L.E. Eeman's work, Leon Ernest Eeman, who was an Englishman who, in the beginning of this century, he was in World War I and he had several injuries from flying. He was a pilot. And he also had dysentery and just a lot of injuries and from the war. And he was in the hospital in England for several years, and he was released 100% disabled. They weren't able to help him recover. And he decided that he was going to try to heal himself. And while he was in the hospital, he was doing a lot of thinking, and he remembered the part in the Bible where Jesus talks about laying on of hands. And he pondered over that and wondered why he said laying on of hands instead of laying on of hand. Obviously, there was two circuits, a positive and a negative pole in the body. And he somehow, where he doesn't disclose, but he came up with this idea of doing laying on of hands on himself by using these copper screens, wires, and handles. And I think the reason why he chose copper was because he knew that copper was a good conductor of electrical energy, so he figured that it would be a good conductor of life energy. And within about a year or two's time, he completely healed himself of all of his disabilities. And he was so amazed that, and not only that, he felt better than he had ever felt in his life. And he was so amazed that this little device that he had invented could do such healing work that he began to open a practice and offer this to others. And he began a healing practice. And I think from what he's described in his book, Cooperative Healing, which Borderland publishes the small version of Cooperative Healing, a condensed version, but his book is over 300 pages. And from what he describes, he sounds like he became almost like a yogi of the life force by using these biocircuits. He became so attuned to the life energy in his body that he was able to help others a lot. And when he first began with his healing work, I think he was using only one person in circuit, just putting one person in the biocircuit. And his first order of business was try to discover why the configuration that he had, that he showed you, worked. And he noticed if he did it reversed, he'd have a tension circuit. And what he discovered after doing, he did experiments on animals as well as people, and he found that there was a specific polarity in the body. And what he found, how the polarity worked, and I'll just show it to you. This, you can see the blackboard. This is supposed to be a portrait of a human being. So he found that the sacrum had what he just termed, since they were opposite polarities, he just called them negative and positive. And we could...
That was arbitrary.
It was arbitrary, but he just knew that there was an opposite charge going on. So he found that the sacrum was a negative, what he called a negative charge, whereas the right hand was a positive. The base of the skull was a positive, and the left hand was a negative. And then the feet, the left foot was a negative, the right foot was a positive. And by connecting opposite poles of the body, he was able to get this biocircuit or relaxation effect. If he connected positive poles, he found that he got a tension effect, where you got very cold and tense.
Poles of similar polarity created a tension circuit. And if he connected someone in the opposite configuration, instead of going through this process of progressive relaxation and opening that we described, they would become more and more nervous, jittery, and even angry. Some of them would throw off the handles and storm out of his office angry even. He had that experience.
And he, after doing a lot of different experiments, he mapped out the whole body. He would do experiments even with the nose and the eyes and the mouth and using those as poles. But what he found was the hands, the sacrum, the base of the spine, and the feet were the sort of the macro energy points on the body. And so he restricted his use of the biocircuits to that because he got the best results. And that he did all that work in the first couple years of his life, and he went on to mostly do work with cooperative circuits, where he would get into circuit with another person. And his theory was that he would, as the healer, would be giving them energy and trying to heal their whatever was wrong with them.
And when he did this, he would connect his right hand to the other person's sacrum, his left hand to the other person's base of skull, etc. And then as he developed this system of cooperative circuits, he experimented with wiring as many as 20 people together at a time, and he experimented with wiring systems which emulated electrical parallel or electrical series wiring configurations. It became a very, very sophisticated consideration. He ended up developing a typology of people, some people being, I think, receivers, and others being emitters, and others being, I forget his word for it, people who kind of screwed it up. If they were in the circuit, nothing would pass through them. They would block it. And other people who had different types. And he would have to begin to type the people and put them in the right order in order to get the effects that he wanted. He developed the science for all of this. He worked on this for 40 years. And although cooperative circuits were one of his major areas of work, his experimentation ranged very widely. And some of the areas that he got into other than cooperative circuits are more what we want to talk about with you today, and it's more what we wrote about in our book. We found that we stayed away in our own experiments and our own work. We stayed away from these cooperative circuits because we found that we were not comfortable working with an indiscriminate mixing of life energy between people. We did not know any way that we could avoid taking on aspects of the life energy imprint that we did not want. Our very first experiment perhaps steered us away from this. I think it was me that had the headache.
Terry had a headache, and I got into a circuit with him, and then I had a headache.
And I still had my headache. So we had shared something, but it just didn't really satisfy either of us.
Yeah.
And in subsequent experiments, we sometimes found that we felt more energy, that we felt energized by the process of doing mutual cooperative circuits, but we never felt that we were able to defend ourselves or completely eliminate negative effects. And since in the holistic model of health, we begin to have a more sophisticated sense that none of us are only healthy, only perfectly healthy. There are liabilities in the life pattern in almost anyone. This idea of indiscriminately sharing energy was something we ended up feeling that we did not want to work with. So even though it's an important aspect of Eeman's work, we are not expert in it. And we advise anybody who does do extensive experimentation with it to be careful.
Well, it's interesting. If you read cooperative healing, most of cooperative healing, a lot of what it outlines is Eeman's trouble with cooperative circuits. And in the midst of trying to art out all the problems he had with cooperative circuits, because he was getting things like people sharing headaches, he discovered a lot of principles about the biocircuits and a lot of other useful information. For instance, he recounts a story about a woman who came to him who had a fever. And he knew that if he got into a cooperative circuit with this woman, and he didn't have the fever, that he could bring her fever down from maybe, 103 to 101. But he knew he couldn't get any lower than 101 in a cooperative circuit. So one day he tried breaking the circuit, putting the wire into a glass with some aspirin, dissolved aspirin, and seeing what would happen, and brought her fever down to 99 or normal. So he began to do experiments with what he called substances in circuit. And why don't we show them the substances?
Okay, that's great. The AV folks, is there some reason we're not going to do a simulcast on the screen? No, we're not. No, we'd just as soon you go ahead and put us on the screen. This is something we've begun to develop because there's a demand for it.
This is an example of a substance circuit.
It's not exactly what Eeman did.
It's a regular copper biocircuit.
It's a segment of a biocircuit that can be passed into a specimen bottle so that the circuit is broken and any liquid that submerges the bottoms of these two probes will be the medium through which the circuit is completed. So if we filled this bottle with 1.5 inches worth of water with aspirin dissolved in it, we'd have the type of substance circuit through which Eeman made this discovery.
Eeman did probably about 70 double-blind experiments with the first thing he did with drugs in circuit. And he had a pharmacist send him about 70 or 80 drugs that he didn't know what they were. And then he'd put the drugs in circuit one at a time for 5 minutes. And he did it on him, and he did it on his assistant.
Mary Cameron.
And he did it on
Cecil Mabey, who's a very well-known radionicist and dowser.
And then he wrote down the results of what he subjectively felt and the others subjectively felt and sent them back to the pharmacist. And they found that almost in every case, for every one of the drugs, they matched exactly the kind of symptoms you would have if you had taken the drugs internally, just lying with them in the biocircuit for 5 minutes.
Eeman was quite upset, in fact, that he had responded so favorably and had wanted to reuse again and again a drug which proved to be cannabis. And he was a very proper Englishman, and he was afraid that this showed some very bad tendency in his own person.
So that was his first introduction to using substances in circuit. Later on, in the 40s, he began to use, instead of using drugs, he would use healing agents such as homeopathic remedies, or I think he even may have dialed up different radionic frequencies and tried them in circuit.
While we're talking about substance biocircuits, some of you may be familiar with Eric Powell, the famous English homeopath who was a contemporary of Eeman's. Powell was an enthusiastic proponent of Eeman's work, and he had developed a device he called the auto-normalizer, which was based on the Eeman circuit, and which passed. It worked a little differently. It worked on connecting positive and negative polarities, but instead of the wiring that we use with the biocircuits, it connected the right and left hands directly through a substance bottle, and it had a ground wire added to it, which was Powell's innovation. But Powell used this with two substances, a homeopathic medicament based on cell salt solutions that he himself had designed, which is to be a general body tonic, and urine, one's own urine. Usually the middle third of the first morning's urination is what is used, and many of you are probably familiar with Amaroli, the Ayurvedic urine therapy, or with the folk remedies in all kinds of traditions which use urine as the concept of urine therapy, briefly, is that urine is what the body is casting out. It is a perfect serum of what the body is rejecting. And based on the homeopathic principle that like cures like, urine is the very blueprint of what you need. And so there are many very wonderful stories of healings and therapies based on urine therapy, and it usually involves drinking one's own urine. But understandably, this is not caught on. And one of the benefits of the substance biocircuit is that it allows one to do urine therapy without, lips that touch liquor will never touch mine, without some of the disadvantages of oral urine therapy.
But you have to potentize it.
You don't,
No.
because this self-potentizes. The biocircuit is a potentizer.
But if you're going to do an auto-isonosa, you have to have a 13 or 14 or 15 potency.
Well, the subjective readout, mine and those of hundreds of other people, is that using urine straight, not having done any potentizing on it, no tincture or anything, just piss in the cup and lie in a substance biocircuit, and you get profound results. It's actually of extremely... I don't know of another modality that has been able to accomplish a particular thing which I value about it, is that it is something that I find noticeably calming and noticeably energizing at the same time. Few modalities can energize me without exciting or stimulating my system, at least to some degree. And urine taken through the substance biocircuit has a strong calming effect at the same time that I find it energizing and balancing. So the subjective influence of the urine in the biocircuit is, I think, pretty much something that people universally acknowledge once they've tried it.
I think before we get into cell circuits, let's mention mindfulness.
Okay.
I think before we get into the work of Peter Lindemann, I want to mention one other thing about Eeman's work. He also used the biocircuits in a really interesting way. He developed what he called myognosis, which was a way of tapping into unresolved and deep memories that are locked into the body.
Which he called complexes. The complex of muscular tension, repressed memory, and repressed emotion, all of which had a physical and emotional and even mental component. The memory is not remembered mentally, the emotion is suppressed and creates obstructions in the emotional being, and there's a physical tension which corresponds to all that. And borrowing from the language of psychology, Eeman called that a complex.
And he developed a whole system of a way to bring these complexes out and have them released. And it all involved lying in the biocircuit, so you could become very deeply relaxed and into a state that Terry and I coined the word intelligent trance, which is sort of a state that's between waking and dreaming, just very receptive, like a hypnagogic state.
Except it's physically based and somatically induced. What's unique about the state that the biocircuit induces, as distinct from a hypnotic trance, is that it's not induced by talking verbally through the mind to the subconscious. It's induced physically, biologically, through the energy system of the body, and engages and affects the mind and the subconscious mind through the body. So it's a profoundly integrated state between the soma and the psyche. It's a unifying state in a particular fashion.
And I think the best way to describe his work with myognosis is to read a small little testimony that we acquired when we were writing the book by a lady named Anne Atkinson, who is a British radionicist. She says, "I was very interested in Eeman's relaxation techniques and asked if I could attend a meeting at Baker Street to watch him at work. It was usually a small group, 6 to 8 persons, excluding Mary Cameron and himself. He would select a person, put them on a couch which was wired with a relaxation circuit, and relax them from the feet upwards. Most of us had no idea how tense we were. On the second occasion, he relaxed me. I was struck by a very curious sensation on the left side of my face. Suddenly, Mr. Eeman said, 'The left side of your face is paralyzed. Can you tell me why?' Without a second's hesitation, I heard myself reply, 'My father caught me smoking and slapped me across the face.' Eeman said, 'And you were ashamed?' 'Yes.' The sensation in my face eased, and I have never been bothered since."
Eeman had a very complex system. Myognosis was not just a matter of dialoguing with someone who was lying in the biocircuit. He would actually move their limbs in certain patterns, and he would locate areas of tension, holding, and so forth. And at the time that he located them, he would, in a fairly directive way, he became a really remarkable practitioner. He would ask a question very directly, as described in that story, and there would be a recall, usually of something that was not previously remembered, and a release, so frequently accompanied by some shuddering, and there would be a permanent shift in which a long-term pattern of bodily tension would be eased. And since we wrote the book, and since we've been apostles of this technology, we've gotten quite a number of letters from people who have done this sort of thing just subjectively. Individuals who are sensitive and who are working on their own psychological integration and growth and kind of working on their stuff, processing their own emotional obstructions, who've lain in a biocircuit and found that they were able to very intensely accomplish a lot of work in a short period of time. And we recently published a letter from a fellow who was doing something, some of you may be familiar with the Sedona method, which is a system of releasing, of emotional holding. And he lay down on a silk biocircuit and began doing some releasing, and very quickly got to a very early childhood trauma associated with a long-term injury in his right arm that prevented him his whole life from ever being able to straighten his right arm. And he suddenly remembered a number of the Genesis incidents, had a lot of twitching and shuddering and a very emotional, profound circumstance of emotional release, feeling emotions. He wept. And at the end of the session, he was able to straighten his arm and use it for the first time in his life. And I've gotten quite a number of stories from people, not all, usually not accompanied by something quite as dramatic as being able to straighten your arm for the first time in your life, but really significantly accelerated emotional processing, because the mind-body integration that the biocircuit affords has a wonderful utility in this kind of way. One of the things that we've encountered relative to biocircuitry in general is there's a great deal of interest in new tools, in machines of all kinds that stimulate the body in one way or another. And we've begun to discover that many people want to experiment with these things much in the same way that a young child will go to an amusement park. They really want to say, "Whee! Wow, what a neat experience." They want a very stimulating, specific ride from the biocircuit. And biocircuits are not really about that. Biocircuits do have a pretty distinct experience, but I think they appeal to people at a somewhat more mature level. And I've grown to have more and more respect for this technology as a teacher, in my own life. One thing I'd like to say about it is in the holistic model, people usually say, well, holism is where you don't see the mind and the emotions and the spirit and the body as being separate. A disease of the body has to do with the mind, the emotions, the spirit. And that's true. Holism does involve treating the whole person. But there's more to it. Part of the understanding that I would call radical holism understands that healing is done by the life that we are. We heal ourselves. No outside thing can come in outside of us and heal us. Perhaps we can do things to break up obstructions or log jams in the pattern or flow of the life that lives us and heals us. But we depend entirely on that for our healing. Well, when you really consider that model of healing, you begin to realize that this is, you're not going to want to use a drug which is going to imbalance that pattern, throw it off, accomplish a suppression of a symptom over here, but not necessarily restore a pattern of health. But you begin to realize that there are other influences, electrical, magnetic, things that are done in the spirit of holism, chemical, there are a wide range, hormonal, all kinds of things that are done that don't go to the center of the being and simply magnify the health, life, the healing energy that is the human being, that is health, that work really to impose a pattern upon it from without. Now, imposing a pattern on the life form from without presumes that you know more than the life pattern. You know what the life pattern needs, and you're going to give it what it needs. I've yet to meet the healer that I trust to do that for me. I trust whether we call it divine or not, I trust that living principle that is healing and is my own life far more than anybody's model of it. I don't think that we've developed a model that's equal to the original. And by working with biocircuitry, I've become profoundly respectful of what this modality does, because it simply creates a new pathway that the life force recognizes as valuable, that it just spontaneously uses. It doesn't add any magnetism to the body. It doesn't add any electricity to the body. It simply allows the life principle that is me to circulate more powerfully and to regenerate more powerfully. And that's why the deeply relaxing experience that people have on a biocircuit, which is sometimes they fall asleep, and sometimes it's like a particularly deep sleep, is a model for what I now recognize as being the center of healing. I think it's interesting. One of Eeman's books was called How Do You Sleep? And it was a treatise on sleep and how sleep is not just rest. Sleep is the activity of health. It's the rebuilding, the generation of the resources of the being, and that this is the foundation of health. It goes on quite poetically at times to get into how central sleep is to our whole existence. And although I passed this off a little bit when I first encountered it, I've become increasingly respectful of the natural and inherent processes that magnify the pattern of health that is my own inheritance, rather than imposing something else upon it. And biocircuitry is, I think, a key technology once you're sympathetic to that view.
I wanted to say something about the differences between the silk and the copper biocircuit. As Tom was saying, when I began doing the research for the book, I contacted Borderland, and Tom directed me to Peter Lindemann. And Peter has done,
Peter, who is here with us somewhere in the room.
He's
There he
basically
is.
taken off where Eeman left off and done an incredible amount of research with biocircuits.
In our book, we call him Contemporary Wizard of Biocircuitry, and he is. He's done some wonderful work for which we all ought to be appreciative.
And there's several experiments in the book that if you can read the book to get into, but I wanted to talk about his work with silk, because that's...
Why don't you begin by talking about Eeman's discovery? Yeah.
Eeman, in towards the end of Eeman's life, in about, I think it was about 1950, Aubrey Westlake, who is, some of you may be familiar with his name. He's
one of the
dead
great
now, but
figures
he's one of the, he was
in British natural healing and holistic medicine through the 40s, 50s,
he
and
was a
into the 60s.
doctor who gave up his practice early to go into natural healing. And he came to Eeman and he said, I think that what's going on here with the your relaxation circuits is not just electromagnetic force. I think it's life energy. And why don't we do an experiment to confirm that? And the experiment that he felt would confirm that would be to use a silk biocircuit, because silk is a conductor of life energy. And
in various models, Oscar Brunner, Reichenbach, Reich, various models of life energy, silk is kind of universally agreed to be an excellent conductor of life energy, and this is why Westlake proposed silk.
so Eeman set up, he actually set up a cooperative circuit, and he even set up a, he did one experiment, I think, with a cooperative circuit and one with a substance cooperative circuit, and he was able to get very good results. In fact, he said, I can't find the quote, but he said that his results he felt were equal to or maybe better than using copper in the circuit. And so that confirmed to him that there was more going on. There may have been electromagnetism going on, but more than that, there was something more going on than just that. But he died before he could really get into researching silk. This was in 1950, and he died in 57. And
he became ill in about 54.
His work with silk would have been all but forgotten if it hadn't been for Peter Lindemann. And Peter picked up on this, and he began to do really years of research with the silk biocircuits, and he found that silk can conduct life energy, but really the quality of the experience that you get in the biocircuit depends on the type of silk you use, even down to like what the silkworms eat and their diet and
so here we
the
have
purity of the silk.
an example of a silkworm who ate only filet mignon, and this is one of the silk biocircuits that we make, and the
all according to Peter's findings and instructions. And I want to talk a little bit about the difference between the silk biocircuit experience and the copper biocircuit experience. And the only way I can really talk about that is by including my own subjective experience and what other people have told me. First of all, the copper experience ends after about 30 minutes. It does its job, it relaxes you, it gets you balanced, and then it obviously ends. You can feel the experience has come to an end, it's time to get off.
many times people, when we're conducting a session with them, will drop the handles, open their eyes, and say, oh, gee, it's done.
Yeah, and
It's that
actually,
distinct.
if you stay on a copper biocircuit longer than about an hour, it starts to get enervating. And that's easy to resolve. You just switch the handles for a minute or two, but you shouldn't. We don't recommend that people sleep on a copper biocircuit. Whereas with a silk biocircuit, the first time I laid on a silk biocircuit, my experience was that I got very relaxed, and I got to the point where I was kind of expecting it to end. Like Terry was saying, the experience comes in waves. So you'll feel this kind of wave where your body will be going through you feel its imbalances, then it begins to balance itself out, and then it gets balanced, and you feel very relaxed. And then I got to the point where I kind of expected it to end because I was used to a copper biocircuit, and then it began again, but it seemed to be relaxing me at a deeper level. And it kind of blew my mind because it just kept relaxing me deeper and deeper. It found places in me that were tense I didn't even know were tense. And that's why I feel, and a lot of others have confirmed this, that the silk biocircuit seems to work even at the emotional level of tension, not just the physical.
And I think ultimately, the silk biocircuit, I have not yet met an energy-sensitive individual or psychic whose sensitivity is so keen that they can feel the end of the spectrum of energies conducted by the silk. This is not to say that there is no end to it, but I've met very sensitive people who've used the silk, but it has not exhausted their ability to follow this sensitivity. I think this is one of the real values of the silk biocircuit, because it can kind of serve like training wheels for heightened subtle sensitivity. You can follow it to the limit of your sensitivity and play with where your attention ceases to be able to follow the experience. And it becomes an opportunity to do a kind of yoga of participating at this edge and stretching your own sensitivity further and further. Additionally, the quality of the silk is very pleasurable. It's smooth, just like, you know, the quality of silk. It's just got that very, very smooth, aesthetically pleasing quality. In contradistinction, the copper feels comparatively coarse. It's a sensual experience at the level of energy, and a very pleasurable one. And it is something that was, for me, very educational, because I've always had sensitivity to subtle energies. But and I've known intellectually that everything is one, that it's just a wide spectrum of energies, and over here you've got the physical, and then a little more subtle is an emotional domain, and more subtle than that is a mental domain, and superconscious domains at the far reaches of subtlety. But quite frankly, my experience was divided up. I had this body of experience, and then there was a gap, and another body, so there was no integration. My emotional sensitivity didn't naturally flow into the gross. My sensitivity to the subtlest levels didn't naturally flow through the gradations of subtlety all along. But through using the biocircuit, I've begun to bridge some of that, and it's kind of it's a stoned or a kind of psychedelic perception to begin to actually palpably feel the unity of physical and non-physical, mental and emotional realms, and to actually have a sensitivity that is unbroken and does not have gaps compartmentalizing your experience into these realms. And I think that's a wonderful value of the experimental use of these kinds of tools.
I was just going to tell one story about the silk biocircuit. Usually I use the copper and I use the silk at different times, depending on what kind of effect I want. And I find the copper is really good for if I feel like I'm getting sick, or just very kind of physical, if I want a very physical rebalancing. It moves a lot of energy through my physical body. Whereas, like Terry was saying, if I want to have a more sensuous or more feeling experience, feel emotionally in balance, then I'll use the silk. But interestingly enough, I thought this was very interesting that when I was pregnant, I couldn't use the copper biocircuit. I had to use the silk biocircuit. It was like the energy of the subtle being that was inside of me. The copper was too coarse for, and the silk was more attuned to its own energy. So I thought that was kind of an interesting statement on the difference between the copper and the silk.
Tell how you went back to copper afterwards. That was interesting. I think that was kind of.
Oh well, after the birth, I found that actually I tried the copper and the silk at the same time because I felt like I needed the effect of both. So and then I used the copper a lot because it was very grounding. And the other thing about that was that it. One of the things that happens to women at birth is they get sort of like a hole in their navel from having
in the energy system.
In the energy system, and the copper helps just complete that circuit. Basically, it's like your circuitry's been blown apart, and the copper helps restore the circuit in the body.
We've also found that with men after orgasm, there's a less intense breaking of the circuit, I think with women too, but more exaggeratedly with men, that can be, there's a loss of energy that continues for some period of time, and use of the copper biocircuit can help to bring that into closure and to plug the gap so that there isn't that loss of energy during that period afterwards. I think we should ask for questions. Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
By the way, if anybody would like... You mean how you set it up?
Well, yeah, why don't I hold it?
Actually, there's... That's a great idea, Peter.
That's going to be the best way for people to really see it, you think?
Well, there's actually several different kinds of circuits. The silk is a three-part circuit.
With 3 parts, you can form 3 major circuits that we describe in the book that we think are the really good circuits that are easy to form with an inexpensive, simple biocircuit, and which we recommend. And there are 6 points on the body that that you want to connect. This is on the back of the body, so that if I'm lying in a silk biocircuit, I'll turn my back to you and show you. I would be connecting these 2 points on the spine. The top and bottom of the central nervous system, the spinal line, are key. The upper and lower terminals here. And then the hands and the feet. And it's the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet. So these 6 points are the connection points. And you want to be connecting positive and negative. The Lindemann centrally symmetrical circuit, which is one of the 3 primary circuits, connects each hand to the opposite foot and the top of the spine with the bottom of the spine. The Eeman general relaxation circuit does the connections that we described at the beginning of our talk. The right hand to the base of the spine, the left hand to the top of the spine. And then there's this connection between the top and the bottom of the spine, which you would make with a 3rd segment, which would create the Eeman optimal relaxation circuit. Towards the end of his work, for many, many years, Eeman simply used that general relaxation circuit that we described at the beginning of our talk. After he'd already been at work for over 20 years, a little over 20 years, he discovered that an actual wire connection between the base of the spine and the top of the spine increased the potency of the circuit. And so he called that his optimal circuit. So that's the 3rd configuration. Of those 3 configurations are the primary configurations that we suggest. One very interesting circuit that's probably worth mentioning to you here, we call the super circuit. This is if you really want to get the biocircuit experience. And this does give a very, very powerful biocircuit experience. It's like kind of, like the biocircuit almost increases gravity in a certain way. It's like you go deep into the being. This is like about 7 Gs. You do a super circuit.
So this is an example of the Eeman general relaxation circuit. With an extra segment, you can connect the top and bottom of the spine.
And that's the optimal.
And that's the 3-part optimal Eeman circuit. And that basically, you'll feel the flow in the upper portion of your body. And it's very distinct. You'll feel your chest start to loosen up and relax.
This is a more...
life energy mostly in this part of your body.
This is more about relaxation. This is more about, I would say, balance would be the word I'd use first rather than relaxation.
Although
for the Lindemann
you're
circuit.
very relaxed.
In both you relax, but this is more like deep, almost somnolent. Like every once in a while you wake up and you go, boy, did I sleep deeply. Something like the feeling there is what I would associate with the biocircuit.
Yeah, and this is...
Did you put left and right by the hand so we know whether it's looking up or down?
This is your left hand, right?
Yeah. No, that's wrong. Yep. Doesn't matter on this one.
This one is what we call a universal relaxation circuit.
Doesn't matter left or right on the Lindemann circuit.
Yeah.
I was beginning to say something about a super circuit. In a super circuit, you connect each point with every other point that has an opposite polarity. That means that there are 9 different connections. There's 3 connections. I'll just draw extra connections to show you here. Yeah, let's see.
Here, here, just take it from the book. Here, take it from the book.
You do it here, here,
Opposite hand, opposite foot.
Come up here and draw it, Peter.
oh yeah, that's it.
Here to here.
See, this is where this improvising.
It's in the back of the book.
And one last connection here.
This particular circuit we just started making, and as you can see, if you had to put all these wires, lay all these wires, or bias, whatever you.
We make it into a blanket in order to
It would
avoid
be too tangled.
delivering a tangle of wires to people.
So we just make it right into a blanket. And it, this particular circuit is so powerful that when we'll go to, let's say, a show where we only have maybe 2 to 5 minutes with each person, we have thousands of people who want to try it out. We bring along a super circuit and we lay them in it. Actually, we have what's called a switching circuit, so we can make it into anything we want. We put it in, first we put them for a couple minutes into a super circuit, super relaxation circuit, and then we'll switch it and put them into a super tension circuit.
And
see
they
if
notice a difference then.
And they can, and it's,
Even at a trade show.
yeah, so in 5 minutes they can get the experience of what it's like. It's a very, very powerful circuit. In fact, I think I'll tell a story about one.
I think we ought to answer more questions because I think there are some.
Eeman, when he did the chaining,
Yes.
what was his logic or his intent behind that, and how was the effect different with 20 people in the circuit than with just him himself and one other patient or 2 other people?
When he did a cooperative circuit, he found that it was better with more people. It was more potent with more people. And what was his logic behind doing cooperative circuits?
In the first place, yeah.
His thought was that if I can help somebody in circuit, maybe if I had a sick person with 3 healthy people, that would help them bring more energy to them. But it didn't quite work out that way.
Well, it did when he got it.
Somewhat.
He developed the science so that he did get it pretty
Yeah,
consistently
but he spent
to
20
work.
years trying to work out the bugs in it.
The logic was to increase the available bioenergy. And what he ended up doing was doing a parallel wiring system so that all the energy went into a pool and came out of the pool. And the idea was that all the healthy energy would be dominant over the unhealthy energy, and people would be able to draw a consensus energy that would be only healthy and would override whatever ill health there was and would be that much stronger. And one thing that I can say about it is that there does appear to be more energy, more juice in a cooperative circuit.
One thing about the regular biocircuit is not going to introduce any new energy into your biosystem. It's going to balance the energy that you have available to you, and maybe by balancing you and becoming more relaxed, you may have more available energy, but it's not introducing more energy into your system.
You do feel like you have more energy, but it is not. There's no place where it's coming from. There's no extra energy being
But
introduced.
in a cooperative circuit or in a substance circuit, you're introducing additional energy. And I think, like Terry said, that was Eeman's intention, to introduce more energy into a sick system.
Conductors, I got your late. I'm sorry I got your late, but have you used other forms of conductors besides silk and copper? Have you used like silver or gold or?
It's a great question. We're just about
Or
to.
have you used wands made of copper with gems in them, or any of those kinds of?
We've done some playing around with crystals and gems, magnets, and they all have an influence on the energy pattern. And there are things that are neat about lying under an orgone blanket, lying on top of a sheepskin rug under an orgone blanket with crystals pointing at you from below and above, 3 of them that are green on the top. But however much fun it is to feel all these different energy effects, and it is fun, and sometimes I think it can be used in healing ways, I've always felt like I was putting icing on the cake. I never added anything to the biocircuit. Biocircuit experience is very potent. I mean, these things look simple, but when you take your attention off of the glitter and fuss, when the goggle lights flashing, all these kinds of things that overwhelm the system with energy, and you just deal with what is actually being experienced at the plane of the biosystem itself, of your consciousness and your body energy, few things that are done in a healing way have an effect that are as powerful as a biocircuit. So these other things that we add never, they increase the experience by 25% at the most. The basic experience remains pretty stable. And I'm interested in, I would like to build a biocircuit out of water. I think that would be a very wonderful and very interesting biocircuit. But I'm not an engineer, and I've really been stumped by how to design the pretzel waterbed or whatever it is that would accomplish this. Because water is a profoundly friendly conductor for the body's energy. Other conductors that we've speculated about using include glass, which is the right kinds of glass, can be a very pure conductor for life energy. With other metals, silver and gold. And I've actually played around a little bit with the conductive properties of silver and gold, and they're excellent. They're actually very similar to copper, but better. So the cost factor has tended to be an obstruction ever since we became so moved by this wonderful technology that we devoted our lives to it. We haven't had enough time or money to afford some of the experiments that would be interesting to do. But I think those are things that will be done soon. In fact, we're about to do some things with silver.
The Indian culture loves to take gold thread and weave it into cloth with other materials. Why not weave in some copper thread with the silk?
Well, we've built combination copper and silk conductors, and we find that it does, using the metaphor of a stereo speaker, the copper has got a really boffo low end. The silk has a fantastic range of high harmonics. You put the two together and you've got your really high quality speaker system,
Okay, you were talking before about like plus and minus or whatever charges.
That's arbitrary, right.
Okay, but you still had to decide what was what. And how did they go about it in the first place? How did they say, okay, there's a charge here and there's an opposite one there?
Well, what he did was he did experiments where he, for instance, instead of connecting up the right hand to the sacrum, maybe he would reverse that and see what happened, connect the left hand to the sacrum. And what happened was he found that created tension. So he just went systematically through the body, and he noticed that if he, hooked it up in this way, then he got a relaxation circuit. If he hooked it up in this other way, he got a tension circuit. So he just, arbitrarily, he used a plus and a negative.
The plus and the negative is theoretical. All we know is that this connects really positively to this, and this, and this. And this connects really positively to this, and this, and this, etc. We don't know that this is plus, this is negative. In fact, Eeman's system presumes that the energy flows in through the left, down the spine, and out through the right hand. Using a traditional Ayurvedic model, this is the active, and this is the passive. And the energy goes up the spine. So you'd look at that model, and you'd say, no, the energy is going in the right hand, up the spine, and out the left. And Jack Schwartz, who wrote an endorsement to our books and who's considered an authority on human energy systems, swears that what's going on here is going this way, up. Whereas Eeman said, no, it's going down. Now, I sit there and I feel flows, but I don't, nobody put a meter on it ever. I never did.
Well, it could be both ways, so it doesn't really matter.
Sure. I think, in fact, it must be that there is a total circuit that has both qualities.
There was no electronic thing or whatever that he said, okay, this is
No.
Figure out where the points are. He just
No.
did it by trial and error.
Only
Thousands
theoretical.
Thousands and
And
thousands
some
of experiments, yeah.
people, you said there's also oddball people out there that don't fit. into
Right.
that.
Some people have reversed polarity. Eeman said that it tended to be people with disorders of the endocrine system, the ductless system. He was using British terminology from the 40s. We now find that he said that was 1% of the population. We think it's more like 8 or 9%, not quite 10% of the population. People who have that experience and need to switch the handles.
A lot of times it is left-handers, too.
But Eeman said it was not necessarily left-handers who would have this experience. It's independent of left and right-handedness, whether you have reversed polarity. Do we need to cut it off now? Okay.
I take one more, maybe.
I have reversed hand polarity. And excuse me for bringing this into the open so suddenly. But have you found any condition associated with polarity reversal that is not usual in the common case?
Not
Sometimes
really. No.
dyslexia.
Nothing.
Not really. Now, Eeman said, and I don't know, this is what he found, but friends of mine who have reverse polarity, they've never found this. But he found that if he had these people who were reversed, use the biocircuit just like every day, that eventually it would change. But I've never heard of that from anybody.
No. I got a letter a month ago from a lady who was describing that.
Oh, well, there's one, so I guess
I
we
have
could.
used the circuit for 5 years and my polarity still remains the same.
Well, I would just
I
say
wouldn't worry about it.
trust your own polarity. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. It was great. Sorry to blind you. I know that's fine.
Oh, that's okay. It was great.
Yeah,
I
excellent.
found out that in the actual way described by Eeman,
Thank you.
the other way
I've used biocircuits